بینەری ڕووداوم کاتتان باش لا هەولێر لەگەڵ کەریم خان ڕاوێژکاری سکرتێری گشتینەتەوە یەکگرتووەکان قسەکەم کە ڕاوێژکاری سکرتێری گشتیە بۆ ئەو تاوانانەی دەرەق بە کوردە یەزیدیەکان لە شنگال و ناوچەکانی دیکەی باشووری کوردستان لەسەر دەستی داعشکران. Mr. Karim Khan, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. ISIS committed crimes or genocide crimes against Kurdish Yazidis in Kurdistan, particularly in Shingal. What's the latest UN investigation on this case?
Well, Daesh committed crimes everywhere where they set foot. In Iraq, not just in Sinjar, but in Nineveh Plains, in Mosul, in Speicher, in Anbar, and of course they've committed crimes in Europe, in Manchester, in London, in Paris. They've committed crimes in Libya and the Sahel region. We're focusing on Iraq, and Sinjar was a very important priority of mine starting off. When I first moved to Iraq in October of 2018, I identified 3 initial investigative priorities. I came with 5 people, that was it. We were staying in the Al Rashid Hotel in Baghdad, and the first priority was the Yazidis, simply because of the scale and nature of their suffering and the crimes that befell them. The second were crimes in Mosul, in the city of Mosul, because I took the view Mosul represented a microcosm of all crimes. We have crimes there against Kurds and Arabs. We have crimes there against Shia and Sunni. We have crimes against Yazidi. We have sexual slavery. We have other types of slavery. So Mosul, and of course it was the headquarters of Daesh. And the third location, priority of last year, was Speicher. So these were the 3 main ones. We're continuing to go deeper into those criminal cases. But this year I've also expanded the investigations to make sure, God willing, that nobody is left behind. I have called it that there's no hierarchy of victim. So that we have created teams also for the Christians, crimes against Christians, also for minorities, Shabak, Kakai and Turkmen, and also indeed for the Sunni, crimes against Sunnis. So these are the investigations at the moment that we are grappling with.
But the worst cases were conducted by ISIS against Yazidis because they were not Muslims and also they were Kurdish. Particularly what you have done for them?
Well, we've, from October when I came, I can say this, that by December, I brought in the world's leading forensic anthropologist, Professor Dr. Louis von der Breide from Argentina, and we conducted training with the MLD, Medical Legal Directorate, and MGD in Baghdad to make sure that the exhumations were conducted to a high standard, bearing in mind they have to feed into cases. In March, we helped MLD and MGD conduct those exhumations. The KRG was an important player. In February, pursuant to a framework agreement that myself and the Minister of Martyrs and Anfal Affairs assisted with, an agreement was brokered between the KRG and Baghdad in which the biosamples, the DNA samples that had been taken from the Kurdish region were centralized in Baghdad with access to the KRG to ensure the greatest possibility of having a match from a body that we recover. So in March we started that process. We have now conducted with the Iraqi authorities, with KRG assistance, a tripartite team, Iraqi federal, KRG and the United Nations, 16 graves, and so far we have identified 62 people. Their bodies, that's the first batch, and more, God willing, will be identified soon.
So what's your investigation mechanism for their ISIS crimes?
Well, it's to break it up and to look at a variety of factors, the seriousness of the offence, the gravity, the availability of evidence. So we have put in various targets, looking at the types of crimes that were committed. We've conducted witness statements. I've reached out to NGOs, whether it's Yazda or Free Yazidis for or Shlomo for the Christians. There's so many. We've reached out to the communities, tried to get engagement, get their evidence, and then conduct our own independent investigations to make sure whatever is in our case file is credible. A lot of people have been doing a lot of different things. Our job is not just to put it together and to create a very unusual meal and ask some court to eat it. You can't mix Chinese and Italian and French all in one plate. We have to subject it and then to see what is good, and that's what we will present to a court, God willing, so that there can be fair trials and proper accountability for the crimes of Daesh.
So how many stages in front of you are there to investigate like one single case?
You can't break it down like that. Every case is different. Every case, it's determined by the availability of evidence and the particular challenges. For example, some mass graves may be mined, some may not be mined. Some witnesses may be alive, they may be available. Some we may be trying to find, or they may be not in Iraq, they may be in different countries. There are crimes of sexual and gender-based violence. These are stigmatized in various communities, and to get people to actually tell you what happened to them is not easy. So every case will have its own unique difficulties, its own challenges, but what we have to do is to make sure we follow the evidence. You don't start with the target, you start with the evidence and you build it up so that at the end you have credible case files.
What kind of information you rely on to investigate these cases?
Again, it's every type of evidence. I can tell you the categories, and the weight of evidence may vary case by case. So of course eyewitnesses, it's one type of evidence. It's an important type of evidence. Real evidence, if a witness says people were killed and we find bodies, this is corroboration and it proves death. Telephone records, video, satellite imagery, other type of forensics like ballistics. There's a whole range of evidence that's available, and of course Daesh, one of the unique aspects is they did not commit these crimes in the shadows. They advocated and proselytized their reign of terror, their most un-Islamic state, in the full glare of publicity. They staged, managed and spun and packaged neatly in ribbons these vile propaganda videos to terrorize and to scare. Now those videos they prepared to disseminate their vile creed are also sources of evidence, because there can be voice identification, there can be physical identification. So what one needs to do is to identify the case files and what's available, and then you are that way conducting a disciplined and focused investigation.
How about the detained ISIS members? Do you use them for investigation? Are they
yes, we have access to them. We have access to them at the moment, and we've been given permission, in fact, to interview them. But I think it's important on these things to make sure one is prepared. There's no point just walking in. Other authorities are conducting interviews, but with suspects, you must make sure that you know more than them, and also you need to know what you want from them. So we have access under our terms of reference, both in the federal government of Iraq. The KRG has also promised that if I wish to go in and speak to certain detainees, they will facilitate that. I mean, the cooperation from the KRG, from the President and from the Prime Minister has been excellent. There's an intergovernmental task force. There's a commitment, and when I met both their excellencies a couple of days ago, they re-emphasized their commitment to justice for the victims of Daesh, and really to show that justice is not just a distant dream. With collective work, the United Nations with the KRG, the United Nations with Iraq, the United Nations with victim communities, we can actually, in a very real sense, try to have justice that can be seen in the courtroom and create a record that will stand the test of time.
Since the massacres in Shingal happened, a few months after that, Nechirvan Barzani, the president of Kurdistan, founded an office in Dahok to rescue the Yazidi men, women, children in ISIS areas. and more than about 3,000 of them were rescued. What do you think about this office?
Well, I'm not going to comment on different officers. I'm the United Nations. I represent the United Nations. I'm the head of my investigative team. What I will say is every sincere effort for accountability is to be welcomed. I think the President and Prime Minister are sincere. They have, in my meetings with them, not only have they been courteous, I can see that they are convinced with what they say. They're not doing window dressing. I am aware of the work of CIGE. I think what we have to do is analyze the quality of the work, where we have good relationships with Judge Ameen and other partners. We have to get the work and critique it ourselves, because that's our job. We can't simply take and present other people's work. We have to make sure that we're going in the right direction based upon credible evidence.
How about the members of ISIS who back to Europe? Do you investigate with them?
At the moment, what I'm focusing on are crimes committed here. Of course, we have every possibility, based upon the consent of states, to speak to individuals that are elsewhere if they're relevant to the crimes here, but that will be not something I discuss here, and it will be based upon case-by-case engagement with those states. At the moment, I haven't done so.
But in the future?
If the case demands it, yes. You see, there's such a mass criminality that straddles, as I say, from Asia to the Middle East, to North Africa, West Africa, and into Europe. One has to be rather disciplined in using the resources one has in terms of investigators and analysts, so that we don't just run around like headless chickens, but we focus cases so we can present something hopefully to a court so there can be accountability. And so it's a massive challenge, but the only way we can succeed is by having very targeted investigations, and that's what we're trying to do.
But it seems that the investigation takes longer.
It will. These are always complex investigations. The way to make them faster is, of course, we had to recruit people and get them visas to come here. And of course, there's now Corona. Before there were fires in Sinjar. Sometimes we couldn't travel. Sometimes we traveled in the fire, but it's dangerous. In Baghdad, there's been, of course, difficulties there as well. The way to go faster is more communication between us and the KRG, and us and the government of Iraq, and us with the victim communities, because this is a shared responsibility. I think we need to be very clear about this. One cannot simply create a United Nations mechanism and say, over to you. The mechanism, the team I lead, we have specialists, we have forensic scientists, we have clinical psychologists to help those individuals that are traumatized. We have lawyers and analysts and financial investigators. But it requires this teamwork so that we get assistance from all parties. And what I said in some meetings today already is that international justice in relation to atrocity crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes, nobody can be a spectator. Everybody must speak up, speak out, and cooperate. Unless each of us are our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper, and have that sense of responsibility that goes beyond tribe or religion or ethnicity, but realizes if we don't expose and confront an evil ideology, that fuel that keeps the criminal network of Daesh going will come back to haunt us. And I think that realization is a very key one to take home.
Okay, good. So how long does this investigation take, you think? Years, 2 years, more?
It depends. These are important questions. At the moment, the mandate is until September. We need the cooperation, and the government of Iraq has to renew it. It's for the government of Iraq to decide it's a 1-year renewal, a 2-year renewal. These are all matters. What we've seen from other courts and tribunals, international justice cannot be done in a day. If one promises victims, survivors, that tomorrow there's going to be justice, you're going to very quickly come across as somebody who's not serious, who overpromises and underdelivers. But the speed will depend upon a number of factors. We need to domesticate genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes in Iraq. There's no legislation in the KRG. There's no legislation in Iraq for genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes. This is the first issue. We need to get the evidence, and we need to, as I said, work together with a degree of purpose and urgency.
So far, how many ISIS members whom involved with the kidnapping and killing Kurdish Yazidis people have been taken to trial?
Well, in Iraq, for genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes, not one. And it's because there's no law.
Not one?
Not one, because there's no law. Everybody in Iraq, in the KRG or in Baghdad, are tried for terrorism. And terrorism can take many forms. It can be financing, it can be assisting, it can be a murder and a rape. And when you speak to victims of all communities, they want their crimes to be the crimes against them to be properly labelled. If a Christian has been targeted only because they go to church and wear a crucifix, that persecution, that hostile animus needs to be reflected in the charges. Is it a crime against humanity? Is it genocide? If a Yazidi is targeted because of their religion, they don't want this tried just like terrorism when that always takes place everywhere in the world. I mean, terrorism is everywhere, it's not unique to Iraq. But not every country has suffered genocide, crime against humanity and war crime. So the victims I speak to from all communities, they insist they want the crimes against them properly labelled. And I think that is something very important. And this is why we need, and we very much look forward to Parliament passing this law. The President, His Excellency Barham Saleh, had agreed a law. I think it was proposed to be put in Parliament, and then Parliament, of course, stopped sitting because of the difficulties that everybody knows about, and quorums were not reached, which the Special Representative of the Secretary General, Janine Hennis-Plasschaert, mentioned yesterday in the Security Council. If this law is passed, it's an important step that will open the door to a possibility for the unique nature of crimes of Daesh to be prosecuted not as ordinary crimes, but as international crimes here in Iraq, as genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes. And I think we need collective effort to realize that if we are serious about putting survivors at the center, if we're serious about putting victims first, we should listen to what they want. What they want is their crimes to be recognized as something that does not happen every day. It's a unique occurrence, acts that may constitute crimes against humanity, genocide or war crimes.
So when the trial of those ISIS members will start?
When will they start?
Yeah.
Well, trials already start in other parts of the world.
Where?
In Finland already there's been trials, in Germany there is trials, in France there are trials. So our job is to collect evidence, to analyze it, to identify gaps.
But in these European countries, are they part of your project? Or
we can feed evidence into any domestic court. Our job is to, we are an investigative team on the lookout for a court. Iraq is the primary intended recipient. It was the Iraqi men, women and children, mothers, fathers and daughters that have lost their lives at the hands of Daesh. It is the Iraqi security services, the Peshmerga, the PMF, the police. They have lost their lives defeating Daesh. So my terms of reference and the Council, Iraq is the primary intended recipient, but this is why we need the law. Until there's a law, it's very difficult to pass that evidence over unless we're speaking the same legal language. So I hope that can take place soon, and as soon as Parliament can sit and consider it. In the meantime, I have a right and a duty to try to support accountability anywhere where fair trials are possible, and with the full, and I'm very grateful for it, with the full cooperation of the government of Iraq, with the full cooperation of the Iraqi judges. We've already fed evidence into different other domestic courts outside of Iraq in relation to Daesh crimes.
Okay. What exactly the Kurdish regional government do for you in this project?
Well, they're vital partners. You were on the front line against Daesh. You have very generously opened your doors and you took in so many refugees, like Kurds have done it many times in the past. That is your hospitality. Those refugees we're speaking to, those are witnesses of crimes. But also you have from battlefield evidence that you have collected in the field. You have ministries that are organized. It's about passing off on that evidence, that information to the United Nations to allow us to look at it and to build cases that can go to court. And it's a partnership. This is what this mandate requires. I go back to my first point. You can't do it alone. Mm-hmm. It is a responsibility that's been put on my shoulders, correct? But it requires partnerships between the KRG, government of Iraq, different communities, and all Iraqis, because this name, crime against humanity, it's not a crime against Kurds, it's not a crime against Yazidi, crime against Shia or Sunni. It's a crime against all of us as human beings. That's why it's called a crime against humanity. And it gives rise to responsibilities on all of us to be our brother's keeper, to care for our brother or our sister, regardless of their tribe or their religion or their sect or where they were, because we condemn and speak out against the criminal conduct of Daesh, which was unjust. And I think if we have that spirit of urgency and collective responsibility, individual responsibility, we have a chance to have a meaningful accountability for the crimes committed. Mm-hmm. So for me, KRG, vital partners.
Good, okay. The ISIS Crime Follow-Up Committee announced that in the past that they have...
The what, if you could repeat that?
The ISIS Crimes Follow-Up Committee already announced that 14 members of ISIS have been caught, have been identified, and they were part of the crimes against Kurdish Yazidis in Shingal. Any update about this case?
I can't give any update on that. I mean, we have a duty anyway to receive evidence in confidence, to build criminal cases, and being as candid as I can be. But we're seeking to identify people that we want to put before a court in Iraq, KRG, or federal territories, or somewhere else. But I haven't got anything more to say on that.
Okay. The result of your efforts of the investigation brings what for people who have been like Kurdish Yazidis, who have been really attacked by ISIS and they lost all their life, children?
I think the first thing is justice. And what does that mean? It means recognition. It means I see you. I see you not as a label, I see you as a breathing human, as my brother. And I think communities that have been marginalized historically, before Daesh, the problems didn't start with Daesh, you know very well, it goes back. Those people are viewed as having a human worth. They view themselves as being respected by other communities other than their own, because they are children of God. And I think the effort that we collectively make for justice will mean a lot, not only to the identification and punishment of individuals, not only for the deterrence that may bring, but for the message that every life matters. As the Holy Quran says, to kill one person is as if all of humanity was killed. So when we have not one person killed, but thousands, we have a collective responsibility, if we are true to our humanity, never mind our religion, whether as Yazidi or Christian or Shia or Sunni or Kakai, to act and to do.
Yeah. Very good. Mr. Karim Khan, your time is highly appreciated. Thank you indeed.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Spas, Kabin Arman.